Good morning and welcome to the second installment of Wired's live living room sessions. On Tuesday, we had Jen from CPRI and Earl from Wasamaki, and their lively and informative discussion on permaculture has left us with big shoes to fill. If you're joining us for the first time, Wired's live living room sessions is a series of future-focused webinars, creating a space for disruptive and innovative conversations with local and international thought leaders. We will be exploring every Tuesday at 1 p.m. and Thursday at 11 a.m. the topics of regenerative agriculture, climate change, building biodiversity, and renewable energy. My name is Keisha, and I'm from Walker's Institute for Regenerative Research, Education, and Design, WIRED. And we are pleased to bring you this series in collaboration with our education partners, the Caribbean Permaculture Research Institute, CPRI, and powered by the Inter-American Development Bank. Today's topic is climate change and the Caribbean, resilience and sustainability. To lead us in this discussion, we have Mohammed Nagdee, affectionately known as Mo. Mo is the co-founder and CEO of the BlueGreen Initiative, Inc., a non-government organization committed to championing environmental conservation and sustainability, particularly within the Caribbean. As an educator, Mo lectures at CERMI's Cave Hill campus in coastal dynamics and management, as well as climate change adaptation strategies for SIDS. Hi Mo, how are you this morning?
Hi Keisha, I'm doing quite well. What about you?
Good. I'm casting live from my living rooms. My dogs are very happy that I'm home. So I'm just warning the audience that, they may express that happiness at some point. You may be hearing some dogs barking. And I'm assuming that you're at home as well.
Yeah, I'm at home. I have a little office tucked away in one of the, in one of the rooms. So I'm here safely here. You may hear my daughter knocking on the door at some point or the other. So hopefully she doesn't scream daddy, daddy too loud.
Excellent. Can you share with us a bit about your work and what you've been doing for the last 10 years?
Okay, no problem. So as you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of BlueGreen Initiative, which is a NGO registered and based here in Barbados. That's about 4 years old. And we are committed to championing environmental conservation and sustainability, particularly in the Caribbean, through various engaging mediums. And I think that the various mediums is very important for us because we do consider ourselves to be a multidisciplinary group of individuals who try to attack this climate change challenges head on or hands on. I do wear a few hats. So I'm a coastal engineer. I'm a geomatics engineer. I'm a climate change researcher. And I'm also a land surveyor with about 10 years or so overall experience in varying capacities. I'm also conducting my doctoral research. So I'm a student. Fighting up, trying to complete this research on on climate change and how it impacts extreme wave climate and sediment changes along the Barbados South Coast. And also, I like to conduct land, coastal, and marine-based spatial data collection techniques and analysis when I have some free time.
Oh, yeah. Of course. On your free time.
Yeah, when I have some free time. My real passion though is I do like to strengthen regional capacity by training students throughout the region. That is very important for me because I think that the exchange of knowledge is really the biggest tool we have in our toolbox when it comes to fighting this. So that really is my passion, the academic component of exchanging knowledge and learning from students as well, because they all bring a unique point of view depending on which island or which region of the Caribbean they do originate from.
The one thing that I think we can all agree on is that climate change is going to take, particularly mitigation and resilience, is going to take collective effort. So definitely the collaborations are very, very important, and it has to be a multidisciplinary approach. But Mo, I know that we have lots of information circulating on climate change. Certainly scientists have been talking about it for years. And more recently, activists such as Greta Thunberg have certainly brought it to the forefront as a critical issue. It's been described as the defining issue of our time. But what does that mean for the Caribbean? What does that mean for Barbados? So we're bringing it close to home. What climate change impacts can we expect now and in the future?
Right. So activists and advocates such as Greta Thunberg have been absolute champions towards the initiative of mitigating against the impacts of climate change. And we need to distinguish between mitigation and adaptation. We really want to set that clear. When we talk about mitigation, we're talking about measures being put into place to reduce the production of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And what she does and other advocates is extremely important, and we really can't overstate, the part that they play in fighting climate change. But and I think that from a regional standpoint, that responsibility for mitigation is also vested in heads of government and CARICOM as well. But if we really want to get a little deeper, I think that the major conversations that we at the local level need to have is that of adaptation. What measures we need to put into place in order to fight those impacts and to protect ourselves, to generate resilience. Because when we talk about generating resilience, when climate change or those impacts come towards us, right, these resilience strategies really are put in place so that we can get back to a normal routine as soon as possible. So let's distinguish. What they do is, without a doubt, extremely important, but on the Caribbean level, I think that greater focus has to be played on adaptation.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing I also want to know, and people might know this, but us in the region, we contribute less than 1% of the total global greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, but yet we are among the earliest and the most severely impacted by these climate change challenges. And we've all heard about it. Many of us know about these challenges, and we in the Caribbean region are actually facing it. So I know the question is that what can we expect in the future? But the reality of the matter is that we're experiencing a lot of this right now. It's given a serious threat towards our way of life, and we really do need a more balanced approach. With greater emphasis being placed on resilience and raising awareness and strengthening capacity and adaptation. And in order to achieve this, we have to outline clear, sustainable, practical, and achievable objectives.
Yes, definitely. One of the points that you just made earlier on in your statement was the difference between mitigation and resilience. And if you could just put that in a nutshell, because I think that that's really important. With all the information that's circulating about climate change, it tends to people tend to kind of convolute the issues. So if you could just put that in a nutshell for me again, that would be absolutely perfect, because I think you did a fantastic job of just kind of defining what the two different things are.
Okay, so when we talk about mitigation, we know that the major cause of climate change or global warming is anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. That's the burning of fossil fuels. So we're looking at productivity sector, the industrial sector, where you're having those smokestacks. We're looking at too many vehicles on carbon-based vehicles on the road. All of those contribute towards global warming, because when we say anthropogenic, we mean basically humans' contribution towards it. And when they talk about mitigation, we're talking about reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So we're talking about going more towards renewable energy. We're talking about moving away from the fossil fuels and going towards solar. And we're talking about taking advantage of bioenergy and other such matters of wind and water and the coastal processes, etc. However, when we talk about building resilience, this has to happen at an individual level, at a personal level. And I always say that we need to make climate change personal, because the amount of greenhouse gases that have already been emitted into the atmosphere or even if we were to stop producing greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere today, it's still a carry-on effect where we're still going to experience a certain level of global warming. So we have to protect ourselves from doing this. And when we say resilience, I think let's take it into a context of a Caribbean example. If, God forbid, a hurricane were to impact anyone or has impacted individuals, the question is that how do we define resilience? So if we define resilience as, for the 2 weeks after a hurricane impacts us, do I have enough water for myself and for my family to drink?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have enough food in my house and in my stores for my family to eat for at least 2 weeks? Do I have the capacity within myself in order to be able to, if there is a damage to the roof, if there are if I am able to repair, and if I had the ability to construct correctly, did I put the necessary measures into place to ensure that my structure is resilient to the high winds and potentially looking from the ground if there's any potential flooding. So those are the sort of conversations we need to have, and again, it has to be made personal. And that's the difference between resilience at the local level and talking about mitigation at the national and the international levels.
Definitely. If you had to say, let's say, list the top 3 impacts of climate change on small island developing states such as Barbados, what would you say would be the top 3 in your head?
Well, I would have to say without a doubt, it's the impacts of storms and hurricanes would be the major impact, first and foremost. And the reason why is that impact is short term, it's sudden. And the science is telling us that we can anticipate an increase in the frequency of high intensity storms and hurricanes, category 3, category 4, category 5. And it goes, we're saying, what are we expecting? We're expecting 2017 hurricane season that decimated, unfortunately, islands within our region. Dominica taking the brunt with Hurricane Maria just last year in 2019. Abaco in the Bahamas took a toll from Hurricane Dorian. Unprecedented size in terms of wind speeds and precipitation. So that first and foremost is the most important to have the conversation around. And the second one I think we need to talk about really is water availability, because without water, there is no life. And climate change is going to have a profound impact on resources, freshwater resources, because we're anticipating, the science is telling us that we're anticipating frequent and longer droughts. We're also anticipating and we're experiencing changes in precipitation patterns. So what you're getting are skewed precipitation patterns where you're getting a lot of rainfall, but in a shorter period of time. And we're also getting heavier rainfall, and heavier rainfall does not necessarily translate towards aquifer recharge. So people, just because you get a lot of precipitation, you're thinking, oh, everything is good. That's not the situation. That's not. You have to give the groundwater the opportunity to percolate, to reach the aquifers, which takes a period of time. And also with sea level rise, we also look at salt. We have to look at saltwater intrusion into freshwater aquifers. So what does all of this science mean? It basically means that it's going to impact on the quality of the water that comes out and the amount of water that we have available. And these are things that if anybody, whoever is listening, they should be able to say, well, hey, this is a conversation that's been had right now. So we shouldn't be anticipating climate change. It's here right now, and it's going to get worse, if we do not put in the necessary strategies to adapt and generate resilience and sustainability, to give ourselves strength. So these projections have serious implications for even countries like Barbados, which is home for me, because in Barbados, we are considered to be one of the most water scarce countries in the entire region. So those two, storms and hurricanes, and we're also looking at water availability. But then I want to go towards food security. Because even, and I promised myself I wasn't going to talk about COVID-19 simply because it's being bombarded all over the place. But just to place just to place some context, where is it? The biggest conversation we're having right now, one of the biggest conversations that we're having right now, is about food security and food availability. And we hear individuals from different governments throughout the region indicating that we have enough food, And it kind of drives home the importance of us being able to produce for ourselves. This is very, very, very important. From a climate change standpoint, so bring it back to the topic at hand, climate change is also expected to have a significant impact on food security in the region. And not just in the agricultural sector, but also in the fishery sector. Remember, we're islands. We're islands in the region, and then we're dotted around with Guyana and Belize and those other countries. But the fact of the matter is that fisheries is also part of the conversation that we have to have with food security. The increased thermal stress is going to result in the decrease of crop yields. And this means that you're going to have to spend more money to get the crops that are needed, and in order to produce the crops that are needed. And in terms of the fisheries, we see surface temperatures rising. So the water is getting warmer. The large pelagic species, those large fish, right? Those species are expected to migrate to warmer waters, which is going to be more north. The waters closer to the equator are going to be too warm for them, and they're potentially going to move northward, which means that you're going to have to look at fish catch, and you're going to have issues with the reduced fish catch, which is also, again, what we're experiencing right now. And I know you told me to mention 3, but I just want to throw one more in there, in that I think from economic standpoint, right?
Yes.
You also have a lot. I think people might come and say, look, this is a doom and gloom conversation. I thought I was going to get something a little less cheery than COVID-19, but this just look like we're being knocked all over the
We'll
place.
get there. We're just laying.
We'll get, yeah. I'm just trying to generate some interest here. So the Caribbean is is the most tourist dependent region in the entire world. And given the economic and social importance that the tourism industry plays across many, if not all, the Caribbean islands, the impacts of climate change on coastal and marine ecosystems, will have substantial negative consequences for the long-term viability of the Caribbean tourism product. People might be saying right now or thinking to me, tourism product gone because nobody in travel. And I really just wanted to throw that in there so a person can understand why it's very important for us to have a diverse economy. To rely on one alone is really in this day not sufficient and not significant and not advice. If you want to take a plus from the conversation of COVID-19 right now is that you're forced to make the decisions, that the hard decisions of diversifying economies and whatnot. And going through these sort of hardships, right, you do tend to come out more resilient and more strong. So maybe that's the silver lining in all of this.
Definitely. I think, the things that you've just listed, the four things that you've just listed, really reinforces that whole aspect of, mitigation and resilience being a multidisciplinary approach, because you're looking at it from so many different angles. And I think what you've stated is very relatable. There are things that are happening in each and every one of our lives that we can relate to the things that you've just talked about. I mean, we can relate it at a country level, we can relate it at a personal level. And so even though, as you said, it does sound kind of doom and gloom, but it does set the stage for things that we can see that is happening right now. And it does, catalyze us to want to take action. And so I'm going to switch the conversation in the other direction now and kind of ask you to talk about building resilience. So how do we go about building resilience in the Caribbean? You kind of touched on it in your last statement. So now that we've set the stage, we understand what our challenges are. How do we deal with these challenges?
Okay, so one thing I want to say first is that everyone needs to understand that climate change, it's not what makes us vulnerable. The Caribbean region is already vulnerable. Throughout the years, we've been able to manage that vulnerability, and we're vulnerable for two reasons, really. The first one being our geographic location. We're located and situated smack dab in the middle of the hurricane belt. So every year we have these hurricanes that are passing through us. And we have vulnerability because many of our islands are also volcanic and we're susceptible to earthquakes and whatnot. So the vulnerability is there. The second reason for the vulnerability is because of the socioeconomic circumstances, smaller economies, social intellectual capital, and all these contribute towards our existing vulnerability. But what climate change does is climate change actually exacerbates that vulnerability. So we now have to create a new norm so that we're able to manage it. And the best way to go about building Caribbean resilience to climate change is that we have to anticipate what is happening. And we talked a bit about what the science is saying. We have to prepare for it,
Yes.
And that is also very important. So it's always more reasonable from an economics and social standpoint to prepare, right, as opposed to prior to the impact, as opposed to being reactionary, which then is a lot more cost not effective, but it's a lot more costly. And so we anticipate what is going to happen, we prepare for it, and then when it does happen, we respond to it. That's the simplest way. That's the simplest way that I can put it. Anticipate, prepare, and respond. And the approach that we go for this has to be integrated. So when we talk about integrated management and integrated approaches, it means the same thing. It means all that we do is that we approach it horizontally and we approach it, we approach it horizontally and we approach it vertically. And when we talk about horizontally, we're going across the sectors, cross-sectoral, because things like climate change impact different sectors, whether it be the food, the tourism, the livelihoods, and it also has to be vertical in that it has to go from the bottom all the way up to the top, from the national level all the way down to the local level. It has to involve everyone, and it has to be, and it has to involve everything. And
Yeah.
I know that that sounds like
A tall order.
that's not that, yeah, a tall order, and it is a tall order.
Yeah.
So hence, if it's a tall order, what do we require? What do we require? We require better coordination within the public sector in conjunction with collaborations with other sectors. So private, institutional, tertiary, non-governmental, you name it. You know, you have to have that that coordination between the two public and the private sector, and it has to be multidisciplinary. So when we talk about cross-sectoral, I don't have all the answers to the questions of climate change. I don't. I mentioned what my background is, right? The truth of the matter is that we have to work together with different disciplines. When we started BGI, one of the things we identified from early was that one or two professions or qualifications are not going to achieve these problems. Me as coastal and climate change and spatial and whatnot, we have ecologists, we have economists, we have water resource specialists, we even have artists. And we brought in the artists. We have filmmakers, Clish Kittens, we have Shruti Marshall Neal, who have been absolutely spectacular for converting our crazy mad dumbed down science, you know, into a matter that people find enjoyable and can understand. So when we say multidisciplinary approach is important, it's extremely important, because I can do all the work in the world, but if I cannot translate it into a language or through a medium that persons are going to understand, enjoy, and appreciate, well, I'm only working for myself or for a handful of individuals. And climate change impacts everybody, everybody.
I'm really glad that you said that, because we're actually going to have some artists later on in the series. So that's absolutely amazing, because it really is an everybody's effort. And I think as we go through the series, having different stakeholders from different perspectives will kind of answer that question that a lot of people ask, well, what can I do? You know, I am just a whatever. What can I do? And so by having, you know, different perspectives, different people talking from different arenas, we definitely see that everybody has a role that they can play in terms of climate resilience. I'm going to just pivot us a little bit. One of the, you know, the catchphrases, or one of the things that we hear a lot is 1.5 to stay alive. A lot of people don't quite understand what that means. But what I would like for you to just elaborate on for us is, what does 1.5 to stay alive mean for the Caribbean?
Okay. So as mentioned, you know, it's like a repetitive tape, you know, if you go back into the old days, so climate change is going to have severe impacts. And we've had some wonderful international initiatives and agreements, with the most recent being COP21, the Paris Agreement, which signaled the urgency to combat global issues of the changing climate by member countries. And they agreed to work together to keep global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. Conversations and more recently have been towards 1.5, but at that time it was towards 2 degrees Celsius. So they wanted to, and we wanted to restrict global warming to 2. And what this really means, again, I apologize for the doom and gloom, but it basically means that at 2 degrees Celsius, we've sacrificed islands in the region already. Because many scientists in the region do believe that the 2-degree cap is insufficient, you know, and concerted effort should be made towards 1.5. And I'm going to give you a little example of Abaco last year. Abaco, and I just did a 2019 preliminary report that came out from the National, I think it was the NSF, the National Science Foundation, just a few months ago, for Abaco. And they,
right?
Pardon?
Abaco in Bahamas.
Yeah, Abaco in Bahamas. And it indicated that they experienced about 15 to 18 feet of storm surge. I want you guys to imagine 15 to 18 feet. If you're in a 1-story house, right, that's approximately 10 feet. If you're in a 2-story house, you're looking at 20 feet. So I want you to just imagine where you are right now and kind of have an kind of consider if a 10 or sorry, a 15 or 20, 18 foot storm surge came into your, through your living room or through your bedroom.
Yeah.
At this current time. So imagine what can potentially be, what can potentially occur at 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's almost like a push off. We've already seen islands almost devastated. We've seen, I think it's Barbuda, who was severely impacted and they had to be evacuated and rebuilt back home, So it really is if you look at what we're experiencing and what some of the caps are on 2 degrees Celsius, no, it's going too far. And we understand that the conversations are happening at the global and the continental and the international levels, but to say a cap at 2 degrees was sacrificing islands. And that's why at the CARICOM level and not just in the Caribbean, but remember there are islands throughout the Pacific. When you talk about atoll islands, these little flat islands that are formed, they have 5 to 10 years at max before they have to leave. Right now, there are certain islands in the region at a high tide, their water is up to their above their ankles. That is the reality of what island people what are experiencing throughout the world. So when we talk about 1.5 to stay alive, we mean that we have to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees. And in order to do that, we have to implement, or the countries in the world have to adopt and agree to restrict the production of our emissions of global GHG, global greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuel emissions into the atmosphere significantly.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pivot us again. So off the doom and gloom, onto what can we do? So when we talk about restoration, regeneration, and rehabilitation, what role do these three things, restoration, regeneration, and rehabilitation, play in climate mitigation and resilience?
Okay. So I may talk about it more towards a coastal standpoint, because that's really my background is, okay? And other individuals might obviously speak within their wheelhouse, but within a coastal standpoint, the majority of the impacts of climate change is going to be expected or observed along coastal zones of the Caribbean islands. And when we talk about coastal and coastlines, we can't have that conversation without coral reefs, as coral reefs are the first line of defense from high intensity waves and storm surges. They just happen to be integral towards coastal tourism, which is a plus, but they are the first line, because when these large storm surge waves come in, the presence of these coral reefs are what dissipates the energy of these waves, so that when it reaches the beaches and when it reaches the back shore, it's not as destructive. So a lot of persons are of the opinion that we can engineer ourselves towards achieving resilience. We can throw breakwaters, and we can throw revetments and sea protection structures and hard engineering structures, and that's gonna solve our problems. But that's not it. It's not economically feasible to design above a Category 3 hurricane. It isn't. It's just too costly. So what we and I'm not. And my conversation here is not to say do not implement in engineering intervention. No, we have to. But it's a two-sided coin. So we have to support the engineering intervention with natural and soft methods of restoration and regeneration and rehabilitation. And I believe that it starts at the coral reefs, because the coral reefs also are integral towards food security. It is a social component towards it, as many individuals, fishermen and fisherwomen, make a livelihood from it. It's also a nursery for juvenile fish. So if from a restoration and regeneration and rehabilitation, if we can restore the reefs within and around our nearshore, I think that that's a very good place to start when we're talking about natural regenerative methods for adapting to climate change. And unfortunately, we've been seeing a lot of decline in the coral reef cover, over the past decades around islands throughout the region. So naturally, we have to naturally rebuild them. And one advantage you do get is that if you do successfully regenerate and restore coral reefs within the nearshore, what I suspect that could potentially happen is that I can also bring back the beaches, because coral reefs are also integral towards sand production, which is also lacking significantly and expected to lack even more as a result of climate change.
It's a huge spill-on effect. Well, before we take questions from the audience, if you're now joining us, you are participating in Wired's live living room sessions. We are talking with Mohammed Nagdee, and he is the CEO of BlueGreen Initiative. On Tuesday at 1 p.m., join Jen and Gregory Langdua, the Chief Regeneration Officer for Regen Network, and we will further this discussion about restoration, regeneration, and rehabilitation and the role that it plays in climate change. So we're going to start taking questions from the audience now. The discussion has vacillated between doom and gloom and hopefulness. So let's take it to the next step. Let's take questions from the audience. We have Andre Worrell, and he's asking, what adaptation strategies should we immediately look to put in place to ensure to shore up our water availability given the expectation of prolonged droughts?
Immediate might be a relative to different people, but I think that one measure that can be put in place is trying to capture as much of the rainwater runoff that we can. And I don't think that we're doing a good job in doing that. A lot of the water is being, especially when you have the stormwater runoff, is lost to the oceans and through the means. And I think that if we can capture the majority of the water runoff, whether it be through the gullies or wherever, and then either use check dams or holding ponds, or even what's the word I'm looking for? Just basically change the direction of it so that it heads towards towards different catchment areas. I think that is a measure that we should just try and hold back that water, so that we don't have so much water being lost to the ocean. I think that's where we need to start. It's not a costly endeavor. Costly is relative. People may say, well, no, it's still costly. It may be $1 million or $2 million, but when you consider the cost of a desalination plant, we should really be looking at natural adaptation measures and strategies to capture as much of that rainwater as possible, so that we can get it into the groundwater, into the aquifers.
Yeah. And Andre, at our Walker's Reserve project, we've actually used a series of check dams and swales, and we have been able to capture water. One of the challenges that we experience at Walker's Reserve in St. Andrew is no water and then too much water, right? So what the swales and the check dams do, as Mohammed was elaborating, is that it allows us to capture and sink water. And so they are quite successful. They're quite easy to do. And implement. And then on a larger scale, of course, it definitely is something that can work. So, all right, so we have another question. We have a question from Ian McNeil. And the question is, what role does urban planning play in climate resilience?
Massive. Massive role. When we're talking about land use planning, or we're talking about urban planning, it's an absolute massive role that it plays. And I think that in many ways that's where it starts. We have to be able to identify specific areas of development, and development is a broad term. And if we understand the vulnerabilities and the strengths of those specific areas, we'd be able to then determine how to take full advantage of how we plan out, development, housing, residential, commercial, and natural. So the urban component of it is very important. I don't think that we do enough within the region. The conversation is towards maybe building codes and making sure that structures are strong and resilient enough. But the reality of the matter is that what is the carrying capacity of certain areas for again, sewage? What is the carrying capacity? How does it impact on water flows, water availability needed for certain areas? Urban planning, are we going to just throw a set of houses into an area that is traditionally has been a low-lying area for flood zones? So urban planning itself towards generating climate resilience is very, very important. And I think that along with water, I'd say that the planning in itself is very has to go hand in hand in one of the first impacts, or one of the first, not impacts, one of the first conditions that we do need to address.
Yeah. Definitely last year at the Caribbean Urban Planning Conference, one of the things that had kind of segued into the agenda that hadn't been on the agenda before was climate change within urban planning. And I think the discussion, they just started the discussion, but it's good that they are aware that these things are happening. And, you know, it's a start. It's a start moving in that direction. But we definitely have, given everything that we've discussed prior, we have to be much more quick about it, you know?
Yeah, we do.
Past the stage of it being a start, it has to be active. We have to continue to go forward. So if we have any more questions from the audience, could we put it up? Great. So from Nick Nealons, the question is, can you discuss current players and projects that are in play or upcoming that are assisting in resilience and mitigation solutions?
Well, there are a lot. I would have to say, we at BGI, we've also worked with Future Sense of Trust. There's CYEN. There's so many organizations and projects that are ongoing throughout the island that occur in silos, you know, towards achieving resilience and mitigation. Coral being one for coral restoration. I think that we need to get together and really, you know, as an organization to identify those projects, as organizations to identify those projects so that we understand who is working on what so that we're not repetitive. In terms of resilience and mitigation, I know that there's a lot of work being done on trying to rehabilitate and restore and regenerate the coral reefs within the nearshore. There are pilot projects that are actually occurring right now. BGI is involved in one. I know Coral is involved in one. CZMU definitely has been a champion. Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados has been a champion for coastal resilience and sustainability, and really is a poster child that other countries try to emulate. So there are a lot of projects that are occurring at the NGO and the tertiary sector level that contribute towards resilience and mitigation, not just from the environmental standpoint, just not from the planet standpoint, but also from the people standpoint. Because they're very important. Sustainable livelihoods is a conversation that we wouldn't have touched on here, but is a conversation that definitely needs to have, because people would have known about the triple P bottom line. It's all about the people, it's all about the planet, it's all about the profits. So that's the sort of conversation that we need to have. A lot of projects happening right now. Unfortunately, because these projects have a heavy fieldwork component, we know that we do have restrictions on travel in 24-hour curfew. But hopefully, as soon as things are I can't say back to normal. I don't think there's going to be a normal. The new normal. When we get back to the new normal, hopefully we can get out there and continue this fight.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be business as usual. At Wired, our Walkers Reserve project in terms of land-based resilience projects, we're also working on that. And then from a mitigation point of view, we have several tree planting initiatives across the island. Wired is spearheading 1 tree for every Bajan, and we have the government's tree planting initiative, Replanting. So there are a lot of mitigation measures that are or projects that are in place, and there are a lot of resilience projects that are in place. And it's making sure that we work together and not try to reinvent the wheel, or, just kind of be myopic in our view in terms of, okay, this one is for this one and this one is this one. But just basically bringing those projects together in a sustainable way that has true impact. So let's see if we have another question from the audience. All right, so we have Dominique Bryan, and the question is, how possible and practical is it to restore our coral reefs, and what should be done first?
Well, I'm going to say that I'm not a coral reef expert, but I've been working a lot with these projects. But what I will say is that one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge that we're facing, is not necessarily with climate change. The issue that we're having with coral reefs right now are ourselves. The nearshore water quality is severely impacted by the population density that is adjacent. In many cases, if there aren't primary, secondary, or tertiary treatment of sewage, it really does impact on the nearshore water quality. Why? Because whether or not we admit it, all roads lead to the ocean. And I think that the biggest challenge that we have towards the practical approach to restoration is trying to improve that water quality. That being said, there are so many different pilot projects and methodologies out there throughout the world that I think that the approach, a practical approach and a responsible approach isn't, well, the irresponsible approach would be to just take a methodology and just send it out there wild and shelly. But I think that the practical and the responsible approach would be an approach that the Coastal Zone Management Unit and the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Economy have been taking, is to adopt these pilot projects on a very small area of coastal area, and in order to test these over a period of time to see what the strengths, the weakness, the success rates, etc., are, and then when hopefully we are able to identify one or a combination of methods that work, then we can then expand it around the island on a national level.
And Dominica, I'll definitely encourage you to follow the work of Corral. As I mentioned before, they're doing excellent work, and they have some very practical projects that are underway. So definitely, look up their website, and you can get an idea of what they're doing in the area of coral reef restoration. Do you have any more questions from the audience? All right, Von Luke T. Jones, he is asking, what role can permaculture farms, ecosystems play in climate resilience in the Caribbean?
There's one specific story that came out of Dominica that for some reason or the other, always just, whenever anybody talks about food security and farming, it's something that comes to mind. And the story was that, or what was said was that most of the agricultural plants that are above ground are not resilient to heavy stormwater runoff nor high winds. And they said that they realized that most of the plants and most of the vegetables that are ground provisions that survived were actually ground provisions, those that were below the ground and higher up on elevation. The biggest conversation is always going to be freshwater availability, and it's also going to be about food security. So you cannot overstate the importance of permaculture, farms, and ecosystems towards achieving climate resilience. This COVID-19 experience has taught us that when things get really bad, we have to rely on ourselves and ourselves alone. And in order to do that, we have to be able to produce for ourselves. We have to produce for ourselves. We have to have enough water to drink. We have to have enough food to eat. So I think that that's also where the focus needs to be. And it goes back to what Keisha, what you were saying, what I was saying, that it's a multidisciplinary approach. You can have a conversation on climate change resilience, and everybody is going to be in the room. The room is going to have enough space because there's so many different disciplines that need to be there so that we can attack this thing in an integrated manner.
I do think the one thing that's going to come out of this COVID-19 situation is definitely persons coming out of that mold of business as usual. Yeah. I think, it's really reinforced for everybody, for the average person, that, we have serious issues with food security. We have serious issues. We have, just the way that we do business and how, that we need to diversify. So definitely, if there is a silver lining, it is that we are going to change. I hope that we change the way that we think, the way that we innovate, the way that we do business. Yeah. You're joining us. You're now joining us. You're joining Wyatt's live living room sessions. We're on the line with Mohammed Nagdee. He is the CEO of BlueGreen Initiative. Join us on Tuesday at 1 p.m. where Jen will be interviewing Gregory Landua, Chief Regeneration Officer of the Regenerative Network, and he will be looking at restoration, regeneration, and rehabilitation as it relates to climate change mitigation and resilience. Any more questions from the audience? All right, we have a question from Brendan Taylor, and the question is, what are your views on the affordability of being proactively climate resilient as an individual? For example, I think everyone would love to build a home which can withstand a Cat 5 hurricane, but the reality is that everyone may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, that's a large conversation to have. And I think that the biggest challenge that we have in the region, probably in the world, towards climate change resilience is income inequality. And that is something that needs to be addressed almost first and foremost. Individuals who do not have the means to even plan for 2 weeks, and to have a food supply or water supply, to have the necessary infrastructure. And I think that is a conversation that needs to be had. You need to has to be supported by whoever, the government. I know that in Barbados, the government are in the process of embarking on the Roof to Reefs initiative, which is a very bold initiative, extremely bold initiative towards retrofitting and ensuring that up to, I think, 20 or 30,000 roofs in Barbados for vulnerable individuals are actually up to scratch to, are able to withstand up to at least a Category 3 hurricane. And I think that that's commendable, extremely commendable. Because you just mentioned coming in the last question about the way we do things, and the truth is that the current way that we do things in the region, they're not going to help us to survive climate change. So these conversations, these questions about different areas of resilience is really, really conversation needs to be had. We have to overcome and find solutions to problems that are facing us. And I personally believe that we can achieve it. We can achieve it, but it's all hands on deck, and everybody has to understand the importance. So back to Brendan's question, it is income inequality needs to be addressed. How it can be addressed, boy, that's a tough one. Yeah. That's a tough one, but I think that sustainable livelihoods, I think that education is a massive part of it. I think that creating new jobs and future-proofing our economies is important. So to go back to Dominica's story, and that one of the biggest stories was that after the hurricane, there was no income, no money coming in for a period of time. There was no work. We see this right now where there's no money from the tourism sector coming out at the moment. So we need to look at innovative ways of future-proofing our economies, and that is just not a national statement. That is for individuals. Keisha, you started the conversation. Innovation is so important. Even now for households and livelihoods where we are all facing a crunch at the moment, because we know that there's a different norm that we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah. Brendan, I can't remember the exact name of it, but if you were to Google Dominica reconstruction efforts, there are some very innovative housing efforts that are going on in Dominica that are low cost. And while they probably would not be able to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, they are definitely Category 3 to 4 ready. So, just in terms of, again, resilience and making sure that we do the best that we can do with the means that we have. There's some excellent examples in Dominica. If you were to Google it, I'm pretty sure that you'd come across that information. Do we have any additional questions? Okay, question from Patrick. How has urban planning failed to account for climate change until 2019? And what other government agencies are critically ignoring climate change? And how can we get them switched on?
Well, I'll answer that from a Barbados standpoint, because I don't want to, I don't want to get too controversial, too early. But given the current government's initiative towards achieving climate resilience and sustainability, I would have to say that it is more than refreshing to see the commitment and the drive for different sectors within government and ministries in order to achieve that mandate. I can honestly say, even from my own personal experience with different ministries, in that each and every single one has a climate change agenda that they are looking to achieve. And I think more and more Caribbean islands and more and more governments are also stepping onto this. In terms of government agencies that are critically ignoring climate change, I don't believe that has happened in the region. When we started off this session today, the question was that what do we expect? And it was, what are we actually experiencing? And the governments in the Caribbean on a whole have come together to indicate that we need to take climate change on more seriously. And within most of the islands, the majority of the islands in the Caribbean, I cannot honestly say that climate change is being ignored. None that I have come across anyway.
Okay. All right, so we're going to take one more question before the end, before we wrap up. So do we have any more questions from the audience? All right, so we have a question from Christina Pula. And the question is, what strategies have been used so far in Barbados, public-private sector, to mitigate climate change?
I think the most refreshing approach to me has been the fact that the government has included the private sector in a more or if not all of the conversations that they've been having. The approach has definitely been integrated, in my opinion, in that we've had the opportunity to comment on and contribute towards policies policies that have already been implemented. I talked about the Roof to Reefs initiative. There's a new planning and development legislation that went into place, I think, in 2018 under this current administration. They're also very strong in terms of the social sector and the social component in terms of support. They have been working closely with different NGOs, not just mine, but several other NGOs in Barbados, provided in even some cases financial support where they could, but definitely, lending out as much support as they can to ensure that using the NGOs to help to support their strategies and to champion initiatives, that they want to see and achieve that. The government may not necessarily be traditionally be able to get involved with, because they are managing an economy which is under a lot of stress. So in that way, I believe that they have had a lot of public and private sector partnerships through and within the tertiary sector, just not the private sector, but within the tertiary sector, in order to achieve or mitigate against climate change. And everybody knows about the 2030 initiative that was announced by the Prime Minister, where we want to go fossil fuel free. And let's be frank, it is an absolutely ambitious agenda in order to achieve. Will we be able to get it done by 2030? I don't know. But the truth of the matter is that however close we get to it, if we achieve it, it's a success. And if we get close to it, every step closer towards that initiative will be a success.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have a deadline, then you don't have a goal. If you don't have a goal, then you have nothing to strive to. So it's a goal, right? Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And I want to thank the audience for their very lively participation. And I would like to thank my team on the back end as well. Next week, we are taking the sessions international. So be sure to join us once again on Tuesday the 21st, when Jen chats with Gregory Langdua, Chief Regenerative Officer of the Regen Network. The Regen Network is working on tracking and funding ecological regeneration using blockchain technology. And then on Thursday, the 23rd, join me once again while I speak to Ethan Solivier, and he is the Chief Innovative Officer at howgood.com. Ethan is an organic farmer, and he is also he also manages the world's largest product sustainability database. So if you've missed today's session or you joined late and you would like to get the earlier part of the session, please go to Wired's YouTube channel for the full recording. And once again, Mo, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good weekend. And be safe.
Always a pleasure. And I look forward to having a coffee later.
Yes,
and the coffee shop's open.
Coffee solves all problems.
It's true. It's true.
All right. Thanks so much.
Take care, everyone. You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.